If it's COVID, then what's that? That COVID means it's 2-1. If it's any sort of forfeiture, that means it's 2-2. The IPL was so very closely linked to this, then that is in a way to me very disappointing because I might sound old and crusty and dinosaur-like, but for all those people like me, and including, actually, dare I say it, Virat. We've given Root the best batsman. We've given Bumrah the best bowler. Was there a magic instant moment? I'm not sure. I might just mention Rohit because I'm a big fan of Rohit Sharma's, and I think he's the sort of player that people love to watch. So I think his 100 at the Oval was just a nice thing to see. Actually, that's hello.
Finally, nice to see you one final time. Hopefully, we can get to the Ashes as well.
Have to find something else to talk about.
Yeah, it's been great chatting with you, David. Over the course of this summer, it's time flown by, so to speak. Yeah. But just to pick your brain about every particular test match that has gone by. Unfortunately, not the fifth one, but it's been fun.
I know. Well, no, thank you. Thank you for your part too. It's been very good. Very good.
Right then, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, due to the circumstances that we've seen over the last 3-4 days, it couldn't have been 2-2, which was David Gower's prediction for the England versus India series, but we've got him on for one final time, and hopefully we can get him throughout the course of the Ashes later this year, but that's just me thinking at the top of my head. David, it's nice to see you. Your first thoughts about this whole cancellation?
Oh, wow. No one, least of all I saw that coming. And it leads us into unprecedented territories. I know other matches have been abandoned, sometimes the few balls bowled. There are various other circumstances, but to have the thing called off at the last moment, to have things like, Virat Kohli sending letters to the BCCI at midnight the night before, the whole sequence of events, I think, needs explaining maybe a little bit better. I was up there on the first morning. I was catching the train up from London on day one to obviously enjoy some cricket, to talk to some people about the game, to enjoy a bit of hospitality, all those things. And by the time I got there, of course, the situation had rather changed. So I spent the half day there talking to people about the whole thing. And the worrying thing for me is this. If, as so many people now maybe cynically, maybe not, suppose, the IPL was so very closely linked to this, then that is in a way to me very disappointing because I might sound old and crusty and dinosaur-like, but for all those people like me, and including, actually, dare I say it, Virat. Virat Kohli, last time he was in England, and even subsequently, has made a big play about how important Test match cricket is to him. So for all of us that like Test match cricket and value it as the most, as the best part of the game, really, as the best part of the game, to see a test abandoned like this was tragic, actually, just tragic. Now, I dare say that over the next days and weeks, more things will emerge. This is always the case, I think, with situations like this. So one or two things that we haven't heard so far might come out into the public ear, as it were. But it does seem that, by the way that the Indian players have hightailed it out of town so quickly, already in the UAE preparing for IPL, that maybe you can argue that's just sensible given the circumstances. Gives them the best chance of being part of it. But maybe that suggests how linked IPL and the cancellation were. I don't know. I'm very happy to wait and see what does emerge, because obviously there were some very private things said between the Indian team and the Indian board. But of course, the crucial thing, as you've already alluded to, Avanish, is this: 2-1 or 2-2, and this all depends on the status decided by ICC, if they ever get round to it, of the result or lack of result. If it's COVID, then what's that? That COVID means it's 2-1. If it's any sort of forfeiture, that means it's 2-2. And of course, all this has an impact on points for the World Test Championship. All this has an impact on the official result of the series. The biggest point at the end of all this is that we had a fabulous series with the ebbs and flows that make a series interesting. We had some brilliant performances. We had some human error. We had drop catches. We had chances taken, chances missed. Both teams, would have been privy to those swings of fortune, those outrageous swings of fortune, and we had a chance to get to a proper conclusion. Would India come out sort of determined in that final Test match to make it a clear series win? Would England be able to fight back and bounce back again and at least get a draw out of the series? And of course, we'll never know the answer.
Yeah, hopefully next summer we have that one test scheduled in or shoehorned in, however you want to put it. But looking back in retrospect and hindsight, could things have been handled better from both boards? I know the IPL is the elephant in the room, but what would you have done if you had the power, David?
Well, I think the problem is this. The ECB in the end had no power as the hosts because of the timing. I mean, let's face it, had decisions or conclusions been come to even a few hours earlier. I mean, let's put it this way. If you're sending emails, if the captain of India is sending emails at midnight to the board, that's too late in the day. When I got to Old Trafford in the morning, which was probably about 9 o'clock, I think there had been meetings scheduled early in that. There were meetings still ongoing. I mean, the officials at Lancashire were still meeting when I got there to decide or to find out what was going on. So had the thing been able to be decided 24 hours earlier, if they were going to abandon the game, that would have helped in many ways for all the people that would therefore have not travelled and therefore been able to cancel arrangements, all being well, and save themselves some money. I mean, one of the part of the outrage is that people got there, would have booked hotel rooms for 1, 2, 3 nights maybe, as is the case, and would have spent money they will not get back, and that's disappointing. That's more than disappointing. From ECB's point of view, the notice given was too shallow. From BCCI's point of view and the Indian team's point of view, right, they've been living with COVID in the camp to some degree for a week to 10 days, haven't they? I mean, since Ravi Shastri first went down, since the backroom staff had got COVID, with the most recent one being, what was it, Yogesh Parma, the assistant physio. Okay, he'd been working on players, all of whom had tested negative, which of course, the day before the game, all of whom had tested negative, which is part of ECB's argument about the reasons for the conclusion or the abandonment of the game. And of course, I dare say, my learned friends, the lawyers will be there advising both boards how carefully to pick their words to make sure that responsibility is not taken on board without due course, without due reference. So it's a very complicated situation. In my book, the series is done. And in my book, actually, I think we'll wait to see what happens. But in my book, India are the winners of the series 2-1. That could challenge, that could be challenged, that could change. And the idea of playing the final test of the series or a one-off test match in the next English summer, well, if they do it, that'll just be, I think that can only be to slightly compensate for the financial losses. Because if you play a test match, say you get them back to Old Trafford next year, it's not going to be easy, given that India are due to bring a white ball squad to England, not a red ball squad. It's not going to be easy because schedules are already very full. But if by any chance they find a magic slot and can play a game between England and India in the next summer over 5 days, well, then that sorts out some of the financial ramifications. But it would be, for me, just a one-off test match and a gesture, no more than that. It singly could not be part of this series, which is now, as far as I'm concerned, done, dusted and closed.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because let's just have a quick word from you about the players, because you played 117 tests for England, but not once have you had to endure something like this. Let me just put you in two camps right now, India first and then England. If you were one of those players out there, what would your approach would have been? I mean, would you have been skeptical to go ahead with it, or would you have just said, you know what, let's get on with it as long as I don't have it?
Well, okay, let's talk about India, because obviously the whole thing came from within the Indian camp. Yeah. And even though they had been tested negative, obviously pressure at the end of a long series, the worry that because COVID was in the camp, and we all do. I mean, we've all seen how COVID can infiltrate ever so easily. I mean, it is that sort of thing. That is the nature of the little beast. It infiltrates. And so once one person is exposed, even if you isolate them as quickly as you can, there is always that possibility that someone else will in 4 or 5 days be diagnosed with the same problem. So this is going to be the interesting thing, actually. As we speak, which is what, day 3 or day 4 of the controversy, as we speak, it is still feasibly possible that someone could still be diagnosed, could still undergo a PCR test and be diagnosed as having COVID. And that could be a player, could be another member of the backroom staff, could be anyone involved with that Indian team, could be someone completely outside of the Indian team. But this whole thing is about the Indian team and their fears of contracting COVID with the IPL around the corner. So if that's the case, Tom Harrison, actually, ECB won't be entirely unhappy with that, in the sense that that gives them wiggle room to negotiate with the insurers. If it's COVID, there's no insurance. If it's not COVID, therefore, if it's even a fear of COVID, is not enough to establish it as COVID. And that evidence, I say, about having the clear negative tests for all the players would give credence to the fact that it was more the fear of COVID than COVID itself. And that's an important difference to make for the boards. Well, if that's the case, at least Tom Harrison and the ECB have a chance of getting some insurance back, which will be scant consolation. Because in my book, I was there. I was there at Old Trafford that morning, talking to a lot of people at the ground in hospitality areas, and trying to add a little bit of wisdom to the situation if possible. And my biggest fear at the time, because there was already the rumor, already the theory spread that it was fear of missing out in the IPL that had led to it for the Indian players. Well, I was doing my best to put forward the theory that both teams had a lot to play for. Kohli had a lot to play for with India, in the sense that he could have won the series fair and square by playing this final game. If they'd had a good game, won it 3-1, no doubt at all about the result of the series. And that would have been triumph. That would have been a fantastic result for Virat Kohli and for the entire Indian team and squad. Because they've worked so hard, they've got themselves out of trouble a few times. At the key moments, they've won games that they might have lost. That's why they were ahead in the series. And I would just like to think that, at the risk of repeating the point, I would like to think that players still rank Test cricket as the prime form of the game. I'd like to think that all those words, when people like Virat say, it's the thing that drives him most, that they are actually absolutely 100% true, because lots of us want the whole thing to remain as it is, with Test cricket being the prime form of the game. We understand, things like IPL, we understand there is a huge amount of money at stake at IPL. It's a fantastic tournament. It's become the preeminent one-day T20 tournament in the world by a distance. And it deserves that, because it provides a lot of entertainment. It provides everything, entertainment and business, and opportunities, of course, for players to benefit as well. So one understands the various pressures, one understands the various draws, the various tugs. But as I say, the one thing I would like is for players to be able to keep Test cricket at the top of the tree, keep the importance of it alive, and be able to have their opportunities on the side as well. That's just the way of life.
Yeah, England traditionally have always kind of prioritized Test cricket until Virat Kohli is there. He's flying the flag high, and hopefully that continues to be. But it is, of course, puzzling, given the fact that the IPL is around the corner. They could have perhaps postponed it, but it's perhaps too many stakeholders on the line, like you said. Last couple of questions from me with regards to India, England, because we have tons of fan questions and IPL questions and whatnot. So bear with us today. I know it's a final one, but we're going to be taking quite a bit of your time. India, how they look back at this series. I know 2-1, you mentioned that they had a great chance to win it. But if there's one area they need to actually improve upon, is it actually the batting? Is it blatantly obvious?
Yeah, let's look at the positives. The outstanding performances came at the top of the order. Yep. So a good opening partnership, which set up games for them. Kohli was out of the runs. For a man of his talents, he'll be disappointed with his tally of runs from the series. The likes of Pujara, Rahane will be disappointed with their performances overall. Both very talented, very experienced players. They would have wanted to do more. But for instance, that partnership at Lords was part of the win at Lords. But that's one area. For instance, also Pant. Pant is a spectacular player. Had the 150 that was evidence of a bit of discipline. The rest of the time, he was, taking too many risks, which, okay, he does that. When it works, it's great. When it doesn't like this, then you've got a problem in that middle order. The bowling was very good. By and large, I thought the Indian bowling attack dovetailed very well. They managed to make their changes and keep their effectiveness. People came in and got wickets. People had a rest. Didn't need Ashwin. Any side that doesn't need our Ashwin and can still be 2-1 up in a series when it finishes is obviously quite a good side and has a very strong bowling attack. So I think the overall pluses are there again. That thing which allowed India to win in Australia, which is a collective spirit, a collective desire to succeed. I think that was important again. And just things like that partnership at Lords down the bottom of the order. I mean, Shami and Bumrah at Lords changed the course of that game. That could easily have gone the other way, but no, put on 100 runs at the tail and suddenly you're winning by a distance. So things like that make all the difference to a team. And that's actually where England need to think hard and long about their own resources. Yes, they were missing a couple of players here and there, one or two, like Jofra Archer, for instance, is an outstanding player, could easily have made a difference here and there. But at the same time, England know that things like dropping all those catches at the Oval could easily, if they'd caught them, that could easily have turned that game the opposite way around, because they had a lead. They could have had a bigger lead. They let India get a massive total in the third innings, and that could have been smaller, and they could have chased down a total. So all these things are the things that you look back on. And both teams will know they could have played better. But both actually, again, on the positive side, both teams know they've contributed to a very entertaining series.
Yeah, and as far as England are concerned, I mean, with the Ashes coming up, many people reckon that it might be making or breaking their chances for the WTC, the second edition, for them to go far in that competition. How do you view England, especially in the red ball cricket scheme of things? Are they in a good phase? Are they still finding their feet? What do you reckon?
Well, although they've got, I mean, for instance, they've got depth. I mean, just to use another name, Chris Woakes coming in after all his trials and tribulations from earlier in the summer, an injury, keeping me out for a couple of games, 2 or 3 games. Suddenly comes in at the Oval and does really well. So they do have depth. They do have people like Mark Wood, who he has to be looked after with his fitness problems, but he can make a difference. So when you're trying to put together the pros and the cons for going down to Australia to contend with the Ashes, there are people like Robinson, who's made huge strides this year and has the sort of style that might do well down under. But yeah, it's different cricket without the Duke's ball. It's very different cricket with the Kookaburra ball. And the pitches down in Australia are just that little bit different, of course, to the pitches in the UK. Where I worry slightly about England is that when they're under pressure with the bat, they rely almost entirely, I mean, this is a generalisation, a slight exaggeration, but they rely so heavily on Joe Root. If Joe gets 150, England are in the game. If he doesn't, then the rest of that batting order is not as consistent as one would like in a top side. So there's always going to be a chink there for an opposition bowling attack to maybe exploit. So, yes, we had some encouraging signs at the end of the series from Hamid, for instance, opened the batting for England, but I think he's got some things technically to work out before he gets to Australia, where the bounce will be steeper. That might be testing for him personally. People like Burns, we know they're very brave, they're very combative, but Burns has got that sort of ability, that sort of technique where you'll get a few low scores in a series, and then when he gets it right and gets going, then he looks a much better player and looks a much improved different player when he gets going, gets settled, and plays his shots well. So then you've got to look at the middle order. So I think looking ahead to the Ashes, very straightforwardly, Australia start favourites, partly because they're at home. Yeah, that normally gives them an advantage, and partly because they have the sort of players that will make life hard for England in both batting and bowling departments.
Well, England fans will hope that they can do an encore of that 2010-11 series down under, and that famous dance as well, the sprinkler and whatnot. But only time will tell how they go about their business down under. Finally, just to wrap up the series, best bowler, best batsman, and best moment. Best batsman first. Is it a no-brainer with Root? And how far was Rohit and Rahul in the pecking order, according to you? Yeah,
I think Root. No, definitely Root. Just the weight of runs.
Yeah,
the way he made them as well. I mean, the style. I mean, this is as well as I've ever seen Joe Root play, and his ability against both the quicker bowlers and the spinner just made it look so ridiculously easy. That's always, of course, that's the easy way of judging how good someone is. The easier they make it look, then normally speaking, they're playing rather well. And he was in prime touch. So I think Joe, for his consistency throughout, and also because, as I say, because he was so important to England. So he's carrying the weight of that responsibility, both as the leading batsman, as captain. But yes, not far behind. Rohit Sharma breaking that bogey of never scoring a ton in a test match overseas. And he looked, half a dozen times as though he was going to do it. Had to wait until he did it at the Oval with a bit of luck, of course. But he's such a very, very lovely player to watch as well. I mean, the two of them have an easy style and a grace at the crease. So just lovely to watch. And Rahul at the top of the order. Again, easy to watch. And I thought the important thing for India in terms of their series win, yes, of course, you always rely on the bowlers to take your wickets. But the opening partnership did the job often enough to give them an edge, whereas England were always thinking, are we going to get runs from our opening partnership? And that's a very different psychology for any cricket team. So, yes, that's my verdict for the batting. Joe Root, very much the batsman of the series.
And bowler, I'm guessing, is a slightly trickier choice. You have Bumrah, maybe Robinson, who's just taken like a duck to water. Anderson, obviously, like just aging like fine wine. Who do you think suits that tag best?
Well, you're right. Those are the three who are in contention. I think everyone else had their ups and downs, but they were the three who consistently bowled well. And it's a tricky choice to have to make. I mean, we would love to say Jimmy, just because it proves that at that certain age, approaching 40, there is still an ability there. There is still fitness there that makes him pretty much a unique animal. But I think I'm going to just go for Bumrah on the grounds that, I mean, for instance, that final day at the Oval, which has, in the context of where we are right at this moment, and pending whatever decisions are still to come, in the context of where we are now, winning on that final day at the Oval when England, could have batted out, they could have made, it could still be 1-1. But the difference was Jadeja bowling into a bit of rough and bowling very skillfully that way, and Bumrah producing just the perfect spell. And for the two of them to sort of cruise through the lower order, the middle and lower order, as they did on that final day, was spectacular. What a way to win a test match that is, and what a way to win a test match from a lowly start on day one. So I'm just thinking that spells like that one, where you end up winning games, that's important. So I'm just going to shade it and say, just give it to Bumrah.
Okay, love that. Root and Bumrah, it's 1-1, and this prediction is yours. But what about the best moment when you look back at this series and maybe in time to come? What would stand out the most vivid moment to take away from you?
That's one of those really good questions, really tricky questions to find something from, what turned out to be 4 seesawing games. I mean, we've given Root the best batsman. We've given Bumrah the best bowler. Was there a magic instant moment? I'm not sure. I might just mention Rohit, because I'm a big fan of Rohit Sharma's, and I think he's the sort of player that people love to watch. So I think his 100 at the Oval was just a nice thing to see. Actually, I mean, that sounds a little bit sort of romantic. But I don't mind a romantic streak in this game. We like a good story. When someone plays such good cricket as he does, I think it's quite a good thing when people sort of knock off these, the monkey on the back, dismiss the monkey from the back and say, right, I've now got 100 overseas, just you watch me in the future. So I think that in a context for an individual and for a team, I think both important.
Okay, that's lovely answers and honest, I must say. I mean, at the end of the day, those are 3 fantastic picks. I don't think many people will disagree with us, but if you guys agree or disagree, let us know in the comments below and keep your comments going. But thank you, and we'll wrap up this particular cricket.com segment. It's been a long one, so watch your content wisely across. We'll break it up for you all because there's some sensational content coming across. For the IPL as well, we have Brian Charles Lara, Mark Butcher, another couple of left-handers, perhaps not as elegant as David Gower, but that's a debate for another day altogether. Thanks, David, and we'll catch you soon.
Okay, all the best to you all. Thank you very much, Avanish.